Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you new here, my name is Donna. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today I am going to review another palette in my Palette Roulette series, and this is a series in which I let an app choose a palette that I work with throughout the week and then come back to you and talk to you guys about it and then choose another palette using that app. Today's palette that we are reviewing is the Alamar Cosmetics palette. This is a palette that came to me in Boxy Charm, and I remember receiving the palette, I remember swatching the palette, and I remember thinking, oh my god, this palette is amazing. So this palette was created by Gabby, who used to work for Boxy Charm. I'm not really quite sure if she still works for Boxy Charm, but Gabby, I can't say her last name, so I think it's Trujillo. I tried, but if it's wrong, God, please forgive me. She created this brand, Alamar Cosmetics, and its first release was this palette, and it is the Reina Del Caribe palette Volume 1. She recently came out with a Volume 2. This palette retails for $28, and you can only find it on the Alamar Cosmetics website or resale pages. From what I can gather, those are the only two places that you can pick it up. It does have 8 shades in it, and these are the 8 shades that you will find in this palette. It does have 4 mattes and 4 shimmers, the 4 mattes being these 4 and the 4 shimmers being these 4. I love this palette for many reasons. Number one, it shocked me. Legitimately shocked me when I swatched it in that Boxy Charm video, which I can link up in the cards for you guys to watch. But also because all of the shades really do work well together. The color story is just beautiful. I love that the palette opens like a book. Versus like, you know, up and down like this. One thing that I do not love about it is that it doesn't have a mirror. But I will say that this isn't really a travel friendly palette anyways. So if you're looking for a mirror in a palette for travel purposes, this isn't going to be the palette for you, because I believe it doesn't really travel well either. The magnetic clasp on it is strong enough, but it's not strong enough that if something gets up underneath there, it'll force it open, and then your shadows will be, you know, out and proud for all of the elements in your makeup bag to dive into. I only know that because I did take it traveling with me this week. It did not travel well. There is splotches on my yellow here where it got touched by some liquid. It's just, it is what it is. I do love the detail in the cover and what it looks like parts of it are raised and a little, it is raised a bit, but it is also like a different kind of material than the rest of it. It is just a cardboard package, but those pieces are more like stickers. They look a little bit like stickers because they feel like they're raised, but they're not. It's all one piece, but they feel like they're raised and they're shiny. So, ooh, shiny. So there's that. This palette also on the shadows has, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it, but right next to the shadow names are either a sunshine or, like, here we have like a water droplet, and down here you have like a sunshine. So the sun emoji means that those shades should be used dry, and the water emoji means that those shades can also be used wet in addition to being used dry. I thought that that was really cool. That was a nice touch to the palette. This is a cruelty-free and gluten-free and paraben-free and mineral oil, I believe it said, free palette. It is made in the USA. As I said, it does have 8 pans of shadow in it, and there are 11.2 grams or 4 grams per pan, which equates to 0.04 ounces per pan, which is pretty on par for most brands and what they put into a palette as far as per pan. what I would say is this palette could be a lot smaller. There are only 8 shades in it. It could be a lot smaller. There is quite a bit of wasted space, so if wasted space is something that bothers you when it comes to palettes, this probably isn't the palette for you. I think we could have squished it all together and really gotten, you know, all 8 shades in a much smaller palette. If I'm telling the if you know, you want my opinion on it, maybe you don't, but if you're here, you probably do. Let's go there. The matte shadows in this are a bit fussy. They're not really, I wouldn't say they're not pigmented, because they definitely are, but they aren't the best. They're super fussy. It takes a lot to work with them, and you definitely need an eye primer with the matte shadows if you want any kind of longevity out of them. I would say that the shimmer shadows lasted me a good, you know, 10 to 12, maybe even longer, 12 to 14 hours on my eyes with or without a primer. The matte started to break down at a good 8 hours if I didn't have a primer on them, which is still a good length of time, really. And when I did have a primer on them, they lasted quite a bit longer, 10 to 12, maybe even 13 hours. I am a person that gets up and puts my makeup on around 5:30 in the morning, and it typically doesn't come off until around 10 p.m. So not that I need my makeup on that whole time, it's just, I feel like there was a moth flying around in here. It's getting a little windy outside, so maybe that's what I was hearing. God knows. But I feel like they could last longer if you used a really good primer with them, and any primer really. I used my MAC Paint Pot as a primer. I used also the Urban Decay Primer Potion as a primer. I've also used the Milani as a primer. When I was using this palette, I did find that they lasted longer, the mattes in particular, with a primer underneath them than they did without a primer. But with that being said, even though the mattes are super fussy, they do blend out beautifully. And once you get them to the opacity that you want them to be, they do blend out beautifully. I have every single color in this palette in my eye look today, and I really dig this eye look. It is actually, I was looking on Pinterest for ideas, and this is the eye look that was, whoops, inspiration for this one. I don't think that I'm perfectly got it down for sure, but I don't know. I think it's at Islo Bodianic, ISLOBODIANIK. I will put that down here in the screen. That was my inspiration for this look today. I tried to recreate it as best I could, and you know, I love it. I think it's beautiful, and I do have every single color in this palette on my eyes today. So the mattes, when you get them to the opacity that you want them, are beautiful. They are beautiful, and they do blend out beautifully. I think the rock stars, the standouts in this palette, are definitely the shimmers and the metallics up here, and I will keep this palette in my collection just simply for that fact. This one right here is probably one of my favorites. It looks really gold in the pan, and to you it looks really gold, but once you actually place it on your eye, it is kind of, well, I guess in my eye look it does kind of look gold as well, but it's actually got a really olive undertone to it that just is so pretty. Just so pretty. And it's one of my favorites. Almost all of the shades in this palette have an enormous amount of fallout, so you're gonna want to do your eyes first with this palette, and for some people that's not something they want to do. I know for me it is actually a struggle sometimes to do my eyes first, because without my base being done, I feel like my eyes look like crap until my base is done. So I just have to remind myself, do your eyes first, do your base next. The whole look will come together at some point. And if it doesn't, then redo it at that point in time. So I have to tell myself strategically, don't take it off yet. It'll be fine. It's definitely not a standalone palette. There isn't a shade in here that you can lay down as, you know, a setting shade. So there isn't a flesh tone shade in this palette that you can lay down on top of any kind of primer. I just used my contour palette. I used the highlight shade in it as the shade that I laid down to top off my primer, so that it was sticky, but there was also blendability to it, if that makes any sense. It's definitely not a standalone shadow palette. So let's talk about the shadows. The first one we have is, again, I don't swatch well, so here's a picture for you. The first one is La Costa. La Costa is a shadow that does have a raindrop next to it, which means it can be used wet. I find that these shadows that can be used wet perform just as well dry as they do wet, honestly, and you don't have to have your finger to pat it down to make it look more opaque. But La Costa is a champagne with kind of a blushy undertone, so maybe a blush champagne, high pigment, high shine, shimmer color. It's got very little fallout actually, and I don't know if it has very little fallout because it is the lightest shade in the palette or because it actually has very little fallout, but it is a really beautiful shade. It is what I used as a brow bone color and as an inner corner highlight often, almost in every single eye look. It also made like what you would think a crazy eye look turn out more everyday. So I liked it for that purpose. The next one is El Malcon. I think it is. Sorry guys, I'm probably going to butcher the shadow names. It also has a raindrop, which means it can be used wet as well as dry. It is a gold, like I said, super high shine, super high pigment, but it does have an olive undertone to it. I think that you can see that in the swatches. It is an amazing, beautiful, beautiful color. It performs more like a metallic. It is a little bit more chunky, so I wouldn't necessarily call it a shimmer. It is definitely a metallic, and it does have quite a bit of fallout if it's not wet, especially. Then you have Veradero. It also has that raindrop, which means wet or dry. It is a really deep royal blue, high shine, high pigment, again kind of chunky, does have quite a bit of fallout in it, especially when not wet, and it performs more like a metallic because of the chunkiness to it. It does have really nice pigmentation to it, but a lot of it is also super chunky. I wouldn't say it's necessarily glitter chunky though. I don't really think that it's necessarily glitter chunky. The next color is Celia. It is my second favorite color in this palette. It is a super pretty turquoise teal color. It's got super high shine, super high pigmentation. It does get lost a bit next to the blue in the palette, the Veradero, even though the two colors combined just make for a beautiful, beautiful eye look. It does get lost a little bit in the same eye look as that because it blends so nicely into it. The blue just kind of takes it over. This one I would say is a true shimmer. It has more of a shimmer to it than it does a chunkiness that you would find necessarily in a metallic. It is a really super pretty color. The last four are mattes. We have Cocoa Taxi, which is yellow. This one has to be built up quite a bit for a really good opacity to it. I know in my eye look today, I went over the top of that probably 2 or 3 times. I would say pat this on first to get the opacity that you want, then blend it, then pat it again, then blend it just to get the opacity that you want for this yellow color. It's not the best yellow in my opinion, and with the orange in the palette, it does just kind of fade into that orange and turn more orange than it does yellow because it's got a nice mustard tone to it. It doesn't have very much fallout though. This is again one of the shades in the palette that doesn't have a whole lot of fallout, and I'm not sure if it's because it is so light in color that you don't really notice it, or if it's because it honestly doesn't have the fallout. This is a really super buttery matte, which I didn't find to be true for all the mattes in this palette. I think that they're pretty firmly pressed though, because there's not a whole lot of kickback in the pans. So, and the next color is Tropico. It is your burnt orange color. It has a huge amount of fallout. This one has a huge amount of fallout, and it is one that does have quite a bit of kick up in the pan as well. It does feel a little more textured, a little more grippy also to the touch, and it does kind of take over an eye look if you allow it to. It doesn't like to really play well with the shimmers in the palette though, I have noticed. I tried to go over the La Costa in one of the eye looks that you may have seen earlier with it, and it doesn't want to perform well with the shimmers in the palette, but it is a beautiful, beautiful orange color. Then we have Guantanamera. This is a really pretty deep burgundy red shade. It does have quite a bit of fallout as well, and this shade, because of the color of it, it can look awful on your skin if you don't if you're not doing your eyes first and it gets on top of your base makeup. It will take over your base makeup. It'll look like you have blush clear up to your forehead if you brush that into the rest of your face look. It is a really beautiful color, probably my third favorite in the palette. It is my favorite of the matte shades just because of the pigmentation in it. It does have a really nice red pigmentation to it. I find that it is a red I can really count on to do what I want it to do, unless it is paired with the orange, and then I have a hard time getting it to show up with the orange as a bright, burgundy red that it is. Then you have Cafecito, which is a deep brown. It is Fallout Central, and this one probably felt the most grippy in the pan. It had a really dry texture to it, and I'm not necessarily saying that it is a dry shadow, but I do feel like it is on my lower lash line. I do feel like it just can kind of be swept away. I did have to go over my lower lash line like 4 times to have that brown really show up, because as I was going over it with the Cocoa Taxi to kind of blend it all together, it just kind of wanted to go away. So I ended up having to go in with the Cocoa Taxi first and then blend the brown into it so that you could actually see the brown. It does seem to want to just kind of wipe away or blend away. So there is that, and there are all the shades for you guys. I do, like I said, my favorites, La Costa, the really pretty blush champagne color I did use in my brow bone and my inner corner quite often. I love El Malcone. It's my favorite in the palette because of just the olive complexity to the gold. It is the center shade in my eye look today. Celia is in my eye look. It's kind of on either end of that El Malcone. I feel like when it's in an eye look with that blue shade, it does kind of get lost in it. But you guys, these are like, are you kidding me right now? And one swipe, and look at that. That is just one dip in the pan, one swipe on my hand. Like, it's just an amazing palette. The shimmers or metallics, they feel really, really creamy in the pan, and the mattes feel kind of fussy. They feel fussy. So, as I said, This was a really good palette. I was shocked by this palette. I feel like if for no other reason, it will definitely stay in my collection because of the shimmers alone. I might even, you know, not pan the palette, but like take those 4 shimmers out and put them into my my singles collection, because I have these mattes probably over and over and over again in my collection, and I have them in my collection that perform better. But these shimmers, I don't think I do. I don't think I have shimmers like these shimmers in my collection. And even though they all have fallout, like what good shade doesn't have fallout? Number one. But number 2, I can deal with it to get eye looks like this one. And I know you guys are probably sitting on the other end of this camera going, like, that's not spectacular. I'm pretty proud of it. I hardly ever do a cut crease, and the fact that I did this one, or a halo eye, and the fact that I did this one and it turned out so good. And I'm so pleased with it. And I didn't have to use my fingers. And I looked at somebody's picture and said, I'm going to try that. And it turned out so good. Oh, enough talking about my eye look. This is an amazing palette for the shimmers. For the mattes, I could take them or leave them. I think I might depot this. I think I might depot these 4 shades here. Take these 4 shades out and put them in with my singles, because I don't necessarily need the singles or the mattes. I will, on that note, say that I was, when I first got this palette, going to pick up the second one, the volume 2, and I'm actually kind of glad that I didn't. The more and more I looked at that palette, the more and more I thought, I have those shades, I have those shades, I have those shades. But $28 isn't a bad price, but I don't want to pay $28 for 8 shades to only like 4, because her mattes aren't solid. Her mattes aren't the best, in my opinion. Again, this is just my opinion. It's not gospel, so please don't take what I have to say as gospel. With that being said, I think you guys have seen my pictures. You've heard my words about this palette. I think that it's a good palette. Do I think that she's got a solid formula for her shimmers? Absolutely. Solid formula for her mattes? Maybe not. But that's okay. It is a palette that will continue to stay in my collection. I'll let you know if I depot them and put them into a singles, into my big hefty singles palette that I just got. For those of you who don't know, I do use the Decide Now app that I get out of the Play Store. I do have a Samsung Note 9, so I do deal with the Android Play Store. I put all of my palettes into this like Wheel of Fortune app, and we have been using it to decide a new palette for, what is this, 43, 44 weeks now. So we are going to do that. As I get new palettes in, I put them in to the wheel, and as I use them in the series, I get them out of the wheel. So we are going to spin the wheel. And my palette for this week is the Violet Voss Flamingo palette. Let me go get that one. I will be right back. Guys, this is the Violet Voss Flamingo palette. This is the palette I will be using next week. It is a really nice palette. It does have some really nice summery shades, which I'm a little concerned about since we're moving out of summer, but I think I can do something with this. I love Violet Voss shadows. She is one of my favorite formulas, so as I'm saying this, I can pretty much anticipate this palette isn't going anywhere, but I haven't used it in forever. I pretty much, you know, picked it up, used it. I think I did a 4 looks 1 palette with this palette that I'll link in my video next week for you guys, or you can look for it now, but I'll still link it in the video. It was my first 4 looks 1 palette, my only 4 looks 1 palette that I ever did. I enjoyed it, but I just can't get my life together enough to plan for that. I'm super excited to use this palette. If you guys are super excited to hear my thoughts on this palette next week, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way you are subscribed and you get notified. Well, if you hit the notification bell, then you'll get notified the next time I upload. I typically upload 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or Sunday, depending on my work life. I do these palette roulette videos every single Monday. So typically my videos come out at 9 a.m. Sometimes not. I am a little technologically challenged. For those of you who are not new to my channel, you do know that. So just in case, please don't forget to hit the bell if you do subscribe to the channel. I hope that you love this video, and I hope that you love the information that you got from it. Hopefully you learned something. If not, that's cool too. If you have something to teach me, please put it down in the comments section. I would love to hear from every single one of you. Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up on your way out, and thank you so much for joining us today. And until next time, guys, bye.